This is Politricking
On record, Tshidi.
with Tshidi Madia on EWN.
Hello, welcome to Politricking with myself, Tshidi Madia. This is episode 20 of a politics podcast brought to you by Eyewitness News. In fact, this episode, I think it's a special one, is the last of the season. We're calling it a day for just a little while. We'll be back because there's still lots to talk about, right? There's still lots to talk about in this country, in the globe as it is. So we'll come back for those conversations. But for now, though, we're taking a break. The team and I are taking a break. And I really, really wanted to end on this point. So the IEC, the Independent Electoral Commission, marked, I think, 28 years last month, in July, of servicing the country. You know, as a journalist, I can always tell you that one of the most magical things to cover in the world of news is an election cycle because of just how much effort it takes to put together an election, to see it from the beginning right through to the end when a new administration is installed. We work very closely with the IEC during those periods. And so that was one of the reasons why we're having this conversation, is watching South Africa and democracy at work. And the other reason why this particular conversation today is important is because it is Women's Month, my favorite month in the whole wide world, also because it's my birthday month, but it is Women's Month, and we try and celebrate particular individuals. I've never had an opportunity to have a sit down with Dr. Brigalia Bam. I get one today. I'm incredibly grateful to our producer Nokubonga also for making sure that this comes to light. So, Dr. Bam, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I gladly agreed to come because the invitation was really coming from my great granddaughters. So I felt that it's a moral obligation for me to share with this generation, which is my great-grandchildren.
I don't know if I feel like we're great-grandchildren. I feel like maybe we're dithering on great-grandchildren, but we really are at your feet. You know,
Yeah.
South Africa's democracy is such an interesting and fascinating thing to watch. But before I even get into the story of our democracy, let me speak to you about what you are up to now. So we've heard your name come up in the Eminent Persons Group because there's going to be a national dialogue taking place in the country. But before then, what was Dr. Bam up to in the recent years?
Well, as you know, I was spending many years of something I liked doing, and that was managing the elections with an amazing team of South Africans. And that project probably gave me the greatest joy of my life because it was my last formal profession. Not just an employment, which was also exciting, but also a contribution. I was given an opportunity to make in the start of this democracy, because democracy doesn't really have a beginning and an end. It's an ongoing journey. And so I was part of a group of South Africans who were in that era of us starting something we are still defining in our context, because it cannot happen overnight. There are things that do happen overnight, like elections. And I was part of those things that happened overnight, like managing the elections and people having an opportunity for the first time in our history, absolute history, from the colonial days to the days of apartheid, that we could be recognized as human beings, and we could recognize as a people who own a land, as a people who have a country, as a people who can be respected with spirituality and with all that we believe in, that is God's image. People are made of God's image. And so this period of our lives has been an important one. This transition of going through this journey of many things that are still happening even today.
What do you remember about the responsibility put on your shoulders? You know, you're a rural girl, you have achieved a lot, you're a social worker, but understanding that we're trying to define ourselves away from our past. We're trying to build a new. Do you remember what it was like when you were selected as that first group of commissioners by former President Nelson Mandela?
I remember just about everything on that note, because prior to that, in 1994, which was really when we were, I call it a celebration of elections, because 1994 was really a celebration of the change. We didn't have to follow all those very complicated, requirements by law. By the time we entered later, after 1994, we were already trapped into so many of the requirements of a legal nature. Whereas I always missed the 1994 celebrations, where you as a South African, you could go anywhere, feeling that you are a South African, and you don't have to produce an ID. People believe you. And then you're as a human being, people believe you, that you are surely a South African. You don't need to be carrying what we used to refer to when you were all not there, a dompas. And then you move around, you can go anywhere. So it was a different feeling of celebration of being. And then, and when the actual elections came in the years later, for us to find South Africans, many people from my own background, which is rural community, and to be able to be with them, the women of where I grew up, and many more other villages, was one of the greatest joys. And I returned home, my own home, which is in the Eastern Cape, and my own sister was there. I can never tell you the joy of knowing that my people today, who are in a village with no electricity, no running water, all those other things, are recognized today. And by the way, we had, from 1994, the second elections, the highest number of women voters in this country.
We must speak about women and voting at some point, because
Yeah.
they continue to vote.
They
But I
continue to
don't know if we're happy with the choices we, as women, are making. The feeling that you described, that feeling of freedom, the celebration of elections, do you think South Africa has lost that over the years?
Not all of them. I think that the generation, my generation, which is an older generation, that experienced exclusion and the humiliation that went with that exclusion and all that, still appreciate to going to vote, that you are recognized, that you own something. And even if you don't have all the farms that we want, that you own a country, you belong to it. And to us, that is still very strong, because we have known something that was different from that. For the younger people, yes, it is not the same. They don't know the past. They hear about the past. They still see remnants of the past. And so those who still see the remnants of the past, which is exclusion, which is class, which is a lack of facilities, not everything in the 30 years has been resolved. And so even the younger generation is fully aware that, yes, we are in a democratic society. It's all exciting. We can now choose who's going to govern us. We can now see a parliament full of everybody there making laws for us. We can see everybody moving, a councillor moving from one place to the other, and we see a lot of people now, because we have become also people like all others who love cars. And so, ownership of cars, in the olden days, if we saw anyone in a nice car, we'd stop and admire. These days, there are too many people. Those little things matter. Those little things matter to people. But the enthusiasm is not always there, because people are basing it, unfortunately, on what they have experienced and what they are experiencing. And that is a big difference between being told about the past and your own day-to-day experience.
Your day-to-day frustrations,
Yeah.
I'd argue.
And the day-to-day frustrations that they do, when you have to stand and wait for a taxi in the cold weather, and you have to take a second taxi, and with your salary, your wage, whatever term you use, you still have to travel that very long distance to be able to get to your place of work. And in your place of work, you don't necessarily have all the training. You don't necessarily have all the acquisition of a particular skill. You are still in informal settings in a particular given factory or in a particular given road, whatever it is. And so there are a lot of those remnants in the lives of people,
The burdens of the past are still very
the
present
remnants of the past.
with people today.
Yes.
What must be done for young people to understand the value? Because part of what you see with every election cycle is fewer and fewer people willing to either bear the cold, the heat, the queues. They're not willing anymore. So it almost feels like the idea of democracy, while they might enjoy it, they don't put in enough effort to maintain it to a degree. When I listen to you speak about what they're dealing with as younger people, maybe that's where the answer lies, as in terms of what's gone wrong. But Doctor, what needs to be done to try and change that? What do we do as a country to get young people interested in participating?
It's not going to be. Let me start by saying that I could theorize it. What human beings are looking for, not only young people are looking because they are handling and experiencing a world that talks about democracy. You see, this democracy idea is something that is embraced not just by South African young people, but also by young people of the continent, young people of other countries. And the technology that has opened all of us, especially young people, more than my generation, to the other world, is what they are yearning for. When they look at another country, let's say they are looking at Sweden, or they hear about Sweden, or they are looking, I mentioned because one of the, or they are looking at, they hear about the Philippines, or they hear about Barbados, or whatever, and they hear stories of people, and they see stories of other young people which are not like their stories. And so the exposure of young people to the other world has also made an impact of wishing that I was there and wishing that my life, not in every case, of course, we still see a lot of poverty, especially in the African continent. But in our own country, unfortunately, because of our history, our experience of our day-to-day experience is all locked up in our various classes. We are like all other societies that are very much in the class. There's the upper class, there's medium class, whatever the classes are. And I don't like to use the word lower class because I can't find an appropriate, decent word to use. And I don't want to refer to people
in that light.
In the lower level. Yes, I apologize for that. Those who are not as privileged as I am. And those who still want the basic education, those people are still looking for the basic, a home, and many of them, hundreds of them, young and old, are still in search of what I call decent life. They are not in search, everybody, of big, yes, it's nice to have a big house. But many people are in search of a home, not necessarily looking for 7 floors. They are in search of decent education. for their children. They are in search of being able to have protein and not eat starch all day long, and be able to go to a hospital where they are not going to sit from 6 a.m. until 7 p.m. in the evening with a pain. And so what people want, all of us want, are just ordinary things of life that are comfortable for people, that are affordable.
What's keeping South Africa away from achieving those things for its people?
Many reasons. Many reasons. We never realized that 30 years would be too short for us to acquire the real democracy and better life for all. We had never run a government, and we had never had an experience of managing the change. There is a difference between people going to parliament in a quote-unquote normal situation. But in our case, our going to parliament meant that phase one had to dismantle. And so a lot of time was spent to dismantle apartheid, to dismantle all those things that made our lives comfortable, and then to begin the acquisition of things we didn't realize, that our history of possessions, of money, of land, of skills will affect us. We didn't have a skill for that. We just assumed in our laws, assumed in a way of life that we are entering into a normal society. And I'm using normal in as far as it relates to us in a society where you have human beings. But we were special people who had gone through for years into structures that had been created. This is not an excuse for many, many years. These structures had been created for our grandparents, my grandparent. I talk of my own grandfather, who was a professional. I talk of my mother, who was born 1906 and was a professional. But they were part of inferior systems in spite of that. And we didn't realize enough that we need to think differently about restructuring South Africa. Rather than copy, I hope you are listening, rather than copy the laws, policy, just about everything, even wages. We thought, if such a country, what do people get for salary? And then we said, our teachers should get. And what standards were we using? We were using global standards. We shouldn't have done that. We didn't know any better. We didn't know and time properly in training our young people to acquire skills. So we should have had a plan, as we hear now that the Japanese did after the Second World War, that the thinking had to be different, that you are not operating in a normal situation. We operated, though we had acquired a normal structure. By normal, a structure that did not have a history of division, a history of such huge gaps of inequality. A system that for years and years had discriminated against many people. So our laws were not drawn up bearing in mind of where we come from. We had to be global and be like other people. And that's why now I think that we have a future now. After 30 years, it's not too late. Democracy cannot be built in one day.
It's not too late.
We have to rethink how we structure the country differently. We surely have. This is our chance, because ordinary South Africans who are not in parliament today will be able, from their experience, from the experience of young people today, the age group, your age group of what I refer to as my grandchildren, they are now in a position to make an input. Whereas with us, it was, I don't know in English, you just copy.
Ungayithetha.
You just keep copying. Oh, and copy, yes, we copy, forgetting that we are copying something that actually is problematic for us. If you copy everything from the United Kingdom and you copy everything from any of these countries, whether it's Finland, whether it is Australia or New Zealand,
These advanced countries.
that copying didn't work for us because we didn't come from the same backgrounds. All these societies and others had been planned hundreds and hundreds of years. Even salaries, their salaries, had been planned over the years. That, in fact, you find
Their
that...
salaries speak to their living conditions and their issues.
And exactly, living conditions, their issues. So we kept copying and copying how the upper class is living, and then our acquisitions are now have to be accommodated for a certain class. And so those really are not excuses, but they are things now that we have an opportunity, not only, and I say this, not only for those people who have gone to parliament for us.
Yeah. I feel like they cannot do it. In
No.
fact, I feel like the answer, if we're looking, is outside of the current structure of leadership across the board. Because I was going to ask you, Doctor, do you genuinely feel that those who are currently in leadership have the capacity to think anew about our problems at this stage of our democracy?
They will not do it on their own. They cannot do it on their own. None of us can say, because I'm appointed into leadership, so I have all the answers and the experience and the training. And that is why I am a great supporter of this way of doing things. We don't have to copy it from anybody. South Africa, by the way, has always, in our own ways, created our own. When you think of the Truth Commission, we didn't copy it. It was not perfect, but it was our own, in our own context. We knew what we had gone through. It was an imperfect, but we did it all the same. And it made gains, not all the gains.
Yeah, I was about to say, the fact that it's coming back now tells you
and
where
exactly
you've
that
dropped the ball.
exactly, there are things we didn't know about, we had no experience of. So now it has to come back like all other things. And to me, that's why I feel strongly that our electoral system, which we had copied from what I call old democracies. And by old democracies, I'm not talking of old countries that had been experimenting for hundreds of years with different electoral systems. And we copied that. After they'd been doing it, that's why we are in this difficulty. And so that's one system that we have to change and tell ourselves, yes, there will be things that are of great value that we must take from other countries. But there are things now we have learned after 30 years that we need to change.
What's the best way for our electoral system to be? What would be the best model? What kind of adaptations do we need to consider?
I think that's where the South Africans, and that's why I smiled. That's why I think that
The dialogue.
I'm not the one only who must do that, but I think a bigger group has begun to think. I feel very strongly that we must have people in parliament, any position, where you are accountable to somebody. There is no way in which anyone in a job, whether it is an office or at your home or in parliament or anywhere where you are accountable to yourself, doesn't happen that way. Anywhere in the world.
The party system isn't working. In fact, former Chief Justice Raymond Zondo in State Capture makes that argument that you send people to parliament, they serve at the behest of their political party, but at the heart of it, actually, the Constitution asks you to be in service of the people, and they're not getting that. So that is, I think, an issue a lot of people have raised about our current system. They'll tell you that the amendments that must be made as far as the IEC is concerned are not up to the IEC. It's got to be the parliamentarians, and they won't do it because the system currently serves them. So we're almost kind of sort of stuck for now.
It doesn't mean that people who are in parliament, by the way, let's say this clearly, and I don't mean to criticize them. It doesn't mean that because you are in parliament, you have all the answers and you have all the experience. We must bear in mind that people make you a parliamentarian, and in South Africa, we don't have very rigid requirements of anyone who becomes a parliament.
That's part of the problem.
In some cases, we appoint you because you are appointed by us, a party, because we like you. We don't have a system that says you have to have certain experience, certain understanding, certain qualifications. You know, we don't have that. Maybe we have something that says you must have matric. I'm not sure anymore what they say these days. And so we don't have a system like that. If the party likes you and you have been a good member of a party, maybe you sing well, whatever you do, but that doesn't give you. And so those are the changes now. Those are the changes we must make. Don't blame us for having done it that way because we copied from others. But we didn't know that this system will not suit our particular context. And that is why now we have more poor people than we had with this system, because there is something not wrong with us only, but the system cannot serve us fully. That's why the poverty in South Africa, if you take South African women and you look at the statistics and all that goes with it, and you compare the poverty today of black women in South Africa, at any time in history, I was brought up in a rural area. So I know that where I lived as a child, there was always, because there were fields. I grew up eating sour milk. There were cattle. I grew up eating maize, pumpkin, potatoes were a great do. Amafuthe agu, fed from, and there was never a time that there was no food at home. Now, when I say food at home, I'm not talking about fried potatoes. I'm talking about food. In the morning, before I went to school, there was porridge at home. And the porridge wasn't bought in the shop. And now, during my own lifetime, where I come from, people have no food. So there is a problem that under the new system of which I have been part of, and when I go home, people have no breakfast in the morning. And I'm talking of my generation that has lived long enough to know what happened before. If you say to kids, milk, they have never seen anyone milk a cow.
Milking a cow.
If you say sour milk, Makolo, big English, how do you make the sour milk? How did you get that? Oh, no, I don't like it. I don't like it because the context is very different. It's a matter of liking it, not liking it. And then you have, it's okay. Ngosho, it's very healthy. You mix maize, you mix it with beans. It's very healthy, and you put a bit of fat in it.
They don't know those things.
They don't know those
They're
things.
not exposed to that way of life.
No, because we don't serve those foods. And yet in the olden days, at the peak of apartheid, I'm part of that. I knew I could drive to my home, which is in a rural area, and I would find food. And so there's more that we have to do. Not just for us to change the system. We really have to consult not only representatives because they happen to be liked by our party. We need to find a system where we will negotiate who gets into a position to do what and accountable to somebody. So you are not in parliament, and if you do something wrong, your party says, don't do it again, okay? We're going to continue to pay you your salary until the end of your term. Listen, don't do it again. And that's the end of it.
That's what we've been watching, 30 years of that.
And it's our fault. People didn't create that system. We created it. We didn't know.
I like that you are one of the few, and maybe that's why this is your last interview, where you are openly admitting where things have gone wrong in our democracy, and it is the foundation that got us here, that's allowed for the system to be taken advantage of, and for it to be so skewed, and to leave so many South Africans behind. I know that you are passionate about women, the cause of women. Black women remain the poorest, impoverished. We remain very much at the bottom of the food chain. When we speak about gender-based violence, year in, year out, we talk about it. It doesn't feel that we're making any solid gains in that battle of gender-based violence, particularly when you look at women and children.
But with the gender-based violence, I don't belong to the active group because of age. So I read about it. What I'm not hearing enough is where are the men in this? What are we doing with a boy child, with a young man? I'm not hearing it. How are we bringing up, especially these days where we have an increase of single mothers? We're told it's one of the countries where we are on the high increase of single mothers who are bringing up young men. Yes, why? Why is it so bad? What happened? Is it because men have become very bad? My grandchildren who are boys, my great-grandchildren who are boys, have they all become, why have they lost the value of respect? What happened? Where were they brought up? How did they grow? Where were they? Why is it that such high percentage of them is angry? Who brought them up? In what kind of society were they brought up? Is it because just they are male that they are all beating the girls, our girls and our daughters? What happened?
Do you think it gets traced back to your initial comment about the things that we didn't know? A part of the argument I'd want to make is that we're also led by people who had trauma themselves. All of you who led a path into independence, there is a layer of trauma that I think has not been dealt with, that has been transferred upon generation. I wonder, because I know you've been a social worker, you've got that as part of your experience. I wonder if there's a lens that we're not looking at from that point of view, and if there is merit at even exploring that direction, anything that direction.
We didn't know. I find it interesting you say that. We never, as a collective, knew how we had been absorbing insults and had developed strong complexes as a people. We didn't assess ourselves that when I was a young woman, a teenager, and even older, I wanted to look like a white woman, worked very hard on my complexion so that I should be lighter, because there was deeper obsession that if I'm lighter, I'm more beautiful. And I belong to the generation, not all of us did, but of a class where we had to straighten our hair These are minor things. You can say they're insignificant. They've got nothing to do with what we're talking about. But the self, the person, the self, by the time we get into this freedom, there are many things that the self, we were not ourselves aware of them. So there was no way we could counsel ourselves because we were not aware of the damage that had been done over the years as the world became global. The more we realized that there were other free countries, I traveled where I was employed by the World Council of Churches in 89 countries. And the 89 countries I talk about, I'm not talking about just the Southern African, and I continued after that in my work. And I didn't know that world existed. I only knew South Africa. Not only South Africa, for a long time I only knew my village I came from because I couldn't even come to Johannesburg to visit my parents as a student. But there's no school for us to say what damage was done to me, to see how other people are living and what I call, if that exists at all, a normal society. Certainly not in some countries. When I'm implying that, I'm not saying that I saw perfect societies in all those long years, in my 20 years of working with this organization. No, that's not true. I saw a lot of human suffering as well, shocking worst forms of racism in many countries, not only United States with the blacks, but in other countries. I saw a lot of tribalism. I saw a lot of class problems. The societies were, I'm not implying that societies were perfect.
Outside of ours.
Outside ours.
I wanna come back to a bit of election talk before I move on to other things quickly. Being the first woman with the responsibility that you had as far as elections are concerned, and I think you've remained kind of in that space, and you said that you've looked at the continent, your sense of democracy in Africa.
Africa is too complicated, though we are all in the same. It's amazing. Yes, we are all in the same place, same space. And why we are so different has to do with religions. It has to do with the impact of colonial governments in our countries. Because
the Francophone versus Anglophone
absolutely.
Yes.
When I went to so-called Francophone countries, beside the fact that I didn't speak one word of French, I found that, yes, we're all in Africa and we're all we're all black and all black hair, kinky hair sometimes, too kinky. But no, it's different. So
let me bring it closer to us.
Yeah.
Let's speak about elections in the SADC region. You've had Mozambique, where we saw protests following claims that Frelimo did not win. You have ZANU-PF right next door. You saw the fall of the BDP in Botswana. But on the other side, you saw the election of a woman in Namibia.
Southern Africa. What we refer to as, what do we call Southern Africa now, these countries?
SADC, the South African Development Community.
We are all very much the same, highly influenced by four factors. Highly influenced by religion. A number of schools that came to Southern Africa were all missionary schools. And that we can't say that didn't impact on Southern Africa. But let's not forget that, which is very important. And for a very long time, many of us in this part of Southern Africa, the bully was South Africa.
Yes.
So many of the parents of the people, their grandparents, were coming to South Africa because South Africa economically, with its gold, were recruiting endlessly for years. And then we had, for a very long time, the same colonial head office in London, all of us, most of us, whether it was Botswana, whether it was Zimbabwe. What also surprised me, which I'm still trying to figure out, which was also Namibia, and to go to Namibia and you can't hear any African language. I'm still confused why. I didn't have the time to understand why the Namibians, we don't speak the same kind of, but go on like that. So Southern Africa tends to be very, very uniform because some of their leaders came here to go to school and were influenced, and the few who were fortunate went to Fort Hare, which was one of the first universities. So there has been a lot of similarity for us. What you should raise to me is West Africa.
Yeah, we can also speak about West Africa because the young people there, West Africa is very interesting, and the desire to divorce itself from the French, that's been a very difficult part, and where every other day you hear the French are involved in an election that's gone awry.
Yeah.
So you can weigh in on the West Africa. I'm also very interested in what's happening there.
And also, which was common in those days, they were not even allowed by the colonial government to teach African languages in their schools. It was that. And
I mean, you go there, you're literally speaking to French citizens, and depending on which West African country you're in,
Exactly.
that's where you have the experience of how closer they are to that former colony, which is actually still very much involved in that current.
But you see, also with them, which is something we mustn't undermine, that they didn't build the French many universities for them. So those who had to acquire university education, the leadership, had to go to France. And that affected besides the bullying methods of a colonial government in terms of, what you do, the language and everything else. And so that also puts them in a very, very different way, which they still do today. Battling with...
They have not let go.
Some, no, because of economic problems. You see, because our countries, all of us, we didn't do development. It was a development that was related always to colonial government in terms of trade. That's a history. I'm not trying to make an excuse. I am trying to talk about the history that has made us different in some ways. And we haven't reached yet. In the continent, we are trying to begin to discover each other and to begin to find new relationships. As a continent of Africa, all our relationships are still very much in trade related to the Western world. And so that weakens us also more. And our training and our universities also, they've done their best, but we haven't really reached a stage of, like others, if you go to Japan, you go to China, you go to some of these, you find that their universities, not only the language, but they've acquired scholars of their own country, scholars of their own situation, scholars, writers over the years. Unfortunately, we have been slow on that. I'm not making an excuse. I'm simply telling about what has happened to us. And so that's why we are still in that, and it's going to take us many years.
Let me then bring it here. The National Dialogue. You are a member of the National Dialogue. You're part of the Eminent Persons Group. The elder of the Eminent Persons Group. She said it, not me. I took it from her. When I listen to you, I see its relevance because there's so many things that have gone wrong that we need to find. But when I look at, we've got a national development plan that we haven't moved. When I look at everything else that we've kind of tried to put together, the visions that we haven't made any progress towards achieving, not sufficient progress, then I wonder, is a national dialogue a necessity? Even South Africans are quite hesitant. No, it's a nice way of putting it. They're quite hostile towards the idea of engaging in a national dialogue.
Well, don't generalize because things might change, because it has happened at a time when spiritually and intellectually we are at our lowest as a nation. We our values, our love. I'm judging it, and maybe I'm not fair, is at its lowest. You must remember that I'm 4th generation down. So I belong to another world. Ubuntu is gone. Many things we have lost in the process of a very short time. And let's not put that as something that is not important. And our greed. Now, I am always careful that I mustn't talk those of my generation and even younger. We were a little bit better. I think we lost out in the change of anything called value. Because of deprivation, we became very greedy because we suddenly discovered what we were missing. And we were losing many things without us being conscious that we were using them. And so we found that capitalism, wealth, money, because we are human, we were caught at our worst. And so those are the things we need to talk about. But the good things, the wonderful things is that, listen to this, even if South Africans are a little bit uneasy, some of them a bit cynical, many of them think that the time has come that South Africans look at our situation. We are at our worst. And so the South Africans might say it's not going to work. But then you get those who say we must find something that's going to work. So that is going to happen. There will be those who will gather somewhere and say, let's find something that is going to work. And you know what my own excitement about this is, besides promoting it? I'm amazed how many young women in this country, the generation, your generation of what I call my grandchildren, is ready to take leadership. It fascinates me. I'm not implying that the problem is male, please. I am simply saying that in these 30 years, let's also look at what has happened that's positive. I'm surprised, in fact, that we don't have the top leadership in this country, all women, because it's a positive thing. And if women are in it, which is my hope, I'm not talking of numbers. I'm not talking of percentage. I'm talking of the quality of people. And so people now, because they are very disheartened, I don't know all these English words, very discouraged, very angry, very hurt. When I think that when we talk about death in our country, I never thought that would happen during my lifetime. That death becomes an announcement. Life lost. Where
We
it has
count through the bodies. We count through the bodies.
and it's,
We're desensitized.
Yes.
Nobody pauses.
so many people have died. It's numbers.
Under the most abnormal circumstances.
So there are many things that we have to begin. Let's get our humanity back, and let's go back to our schools. And I think finally the South Africans, even if they are not now, they want their generation that will come after them, your age group, to be different. And that's my hope. I am convinced you will not sit and watch. That finally is going to come a time that says, do something, even if you don't believe it's going to work for better. And most South Africans, like you in this room, in the studio, have some idea of what could be done differently. It might not be well articulated, but it would amaze you. Beside a parliamentarian in Cape Town, you might have an idea that maybe perhaps if we open a school, which I was hoping, I'm too old now, open an institute for women, which brings women, as even if they haven't passed matric, I wouldn't care, They come and you open an institute of training which is not based on your level of passing, whether you got 20% or you got fine, and you say, the women in this institute, it's going to happen. The women in this institute have to be professionals in A, B, C, D, and we sit down and we design ourselves what should be in the syllabus. What should they learn? So there is possibility. And I am hoping that there is no government that's going to say, no, you can't have these schools. Because when you look at young mothers now, they are not being trained by anybody, anyway. And they're on the increase. And they have no possibility. And so there's someone who's going to come from you at some point after the anger to say, maybe with these numbers that are increasing, what are we going to do? Because they're going to bring up the next generation of younger women, bringing more young people to the world. I can assure you, there are going to be things after the shock of the things where people are going to say, let's see what we can offer. What idea we can all experiment. I think
after the pain and the lull, you believe South Africans will want to get up and save their country.
Yes, I'm convinced about that.
I really hope so. I hope you're right. No,
it is going to happen. Watch it. Not now, because we've never done it. All we know is Parliament. You see, you have to understand, all we know is Parliament. And all we read, the thing that upsets us is it's all about
the corruption, the disastrous leadership.
It's about the corruption.
Cities that are not working.
And then
so
things are not working. So three quarters of our information is negative. After you listen to the news, which I do all the time.
I work in news. It's very depressing. I was thinking about the situation with the immigrants.
Which I did when we joined the SABC. We were the first group, so we didn't know how the SABC works. We didn't have a clue. So we would sit there and try and look clever. And then one of the jobs I had to do assigned is to listen to the news. Since I've been listening to the news 30 years ago, I still do so. So I'm saying it on a lighter note. It's for real. And so you heard nothing, not one word positive, not one word. The second day, yes, I measure. The second day.
But doctor, it's because we're not having a positive experience in our country. And you speak about the possibility. I am pretty much done. Thank you for your time. What I wonder, though, is what is your part as a parting shot, your wishes for our democracy, for our country, for the next generation?
Sometimes I don't. We struggled very much with this in finding a word. I used to say to my colleagues, "Can we find one word in any of our languages that says democracy?" In all, we have about
we have freedom, not democracy. I don't know about democracy.
Democracy. I said, let's find, with colleagues, I used to say, let's all find a relevant word in our mother tongue, not in English, that says democracy. Because I think this big apple we call democracy is hanging over us, and we've forgotten that what we're really talking about is how each individual will lead a normal life and have food, clothing, education, dignity, spirituality. You see, that's what we're talking about. We're not talking about all of us owning 15 cars, those who are lucky. And I think this definition of what the kind of society, let's leave democracy out because for now, let's say what kind of society do we now want after 30 years? We have these problems which everybody knows. All our problems, everybody knows. And the difference is that debate is not going to be done by the people in Cape Town only. That debate is going to happen on all levels. And that is something that won't happen. It's not the people in Cape Town who are going to sit for us and tell us that we set up what I call a Young Women's Institute. It's coming from me, and I'll pass it to you before I go, and I'll pass it to her. And then I'll say all the hospitals must be managed back by private companies, and we take them out of them being managed by government. That's not going to come from Parliament. It's going to come from you. That hospital will be managed differently and better.
So you want government? I actually never explored that with you. So ideally, government should not be in that managing those kind of spaces. Just
Not all. No, they can manage some, but yes.
Some?
Better in other countries, you have, even here in South Africa, by the way, where a hospital is not depending on the public, it's managed by a company, and the government pays a company to run it. In the olden days, the churches, the missionaries used to run the hospitals.
Yes.
This happens today in other countries. In the United States, for instance, many social workers are employed not by the state. The state, they're employed by the churches, by agencies, rather than by Washington, somewhere very far. The level moves lower. Those are some, it's closer because Pretoria is too far from my village. And you can't leave that to a mayor because also the mayor is too far from my village. So those are the things the South Africans are going to begin to think about.
Okay. You see, I didn't ask you about the president's leadership. I didn't ask you about the ANC. And there's a reason why I didn't ask you about those things. Because at the heart of it, I think the broader, most important conversation is about what kind of society we want. And I wanted your thoughts about that.
We are now going to have, for the first time, and I'm one of the oldest human beings in this country, we are going to have, the first time, South Africans sitting. I've been part of the group on many things we were trying to do in the early days. This is going to be the first time that the South Africans, not Parliament, not ANC, not church, those are the organizations I've been part of, that South Africans ordinary will be in a room, a group of you, somewhere, and you will say, we think that it's only the first time. So on that side of it, I'm very excited. And you are not accountable to your party. So what you will be saying, you're not going to tell me that you are sent by your party to come and say they want water in my village. No, this time is going to come. And this is, to me, the exciting part. It might be an imperfect structure, but it's going to give an opportunity for the first time.
And you're not worried about where we'll take that information and what happens with it post-dialogue. You're not worried that it will be, again, we discussed it, we know what South Africans want.
Because you will make sure that once we have finished the information that we are proposing, we don't go and forget what we said and not follow it up. If you and me and others we decide, I was just talking about this as Abid. There are many other ideas.
Yes.
We are going to make sure afterwards that we don't go to a parliament committee and tell them that we think that all the hospitals we are not able to manage. Our system has collapsed. Totally. We don't want to go to them, to Cape Town now and say, all our hospitals in the villages, rural center, have all collapsed the system. Please, can you come and make some arrangements, please, and go to Zululand? Because you don't even know how many rural areas are there. You don't even know how many people are talking about where.
The answer is definitely not in Parliament. The answer, from what I'm hearing, if I'm listening properly, lies in us.
This is the first time.
Dr. Brigalia Bam, thank you for your time.
Yeah. Thank you for inviting me to come.
Hopefully it's not the last time we talk.
No, I'm afraid so, but I came because I thought let me be nice to the person who asked me to come.
We
I
thank
don't
Nukubonga,
take
yes.
this, and I'm very pleased to be here, and it's an opportunity for me, but I might not get it again. Thank you so much. God bless you.
This is Politricking
On record, Tshidi.
with Tshidi Madia on EWN.